conference. Today, we are going to talk about the Olympics, and I think we stumbled upon this topic because we felt it's one that's going to hold a lot of relevance in the coming months because it's going to be well organized very soon in Paris, and also because India as a country is bidding to host it in 2036 and also advocate for the inclusion of new sports. So I think there's a lot of interesting news we're going to find on the Olympics field. So that's why we thought it's important to maybe converse a little bit about the ramifications it has on the international arena, and also talk a little bit about its history. So I'm going to start with the first question of the conference, and whoever wants to answer it can raise their hand and I'll call upon you. So the first question is, how has the Olympic movement contributed to broader discussions around topics such as peace, unity, and global cooperation? And have there been some controversial moments or decisions in the Olympic history? Yeah, Charu, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think it's important to remember that the Olympics is first and foremost for a lot of people around the world a form of entertainment. And entertainment gets the mass media, it gets the eyes and the ears, and everyone is looking at whatever's going on. And especially for a multi-billion-dollar sports event like the Olympics and other multi-billion dollar sports events as well. For example, the FIFA, the Asian Games, or anything of that sort. It always has a lot more than just sports or entertainment holding on to it because it is a source of how the people view the world. And it is a source for people to express their discontent or their dissatisfaction over contemporary issues, right? And I think that is where Olympics finds itself in that it always reflects a sense of how countries react to each other, especially because the Olympics has is one of the oldest sports tournaments and has witnessed countries join in year after year as countries kind of begin to form, as conflicts come and go. For example, the famous Olympics truce is something that we've witnessed in almost every single Olympics that we've seen, where it is a well accepted kind of customary thing in international politics that for the time of the Olympics, there will be peace. At least performatively. And I think that is one of the main issues that also comes with the Olympics, in that this piece is very performative in the sense that it doesn't actually manifest into peace in the real life world. It only goes to the extent that it makes sure that there is no interruption of the games that's happening. There's no interruption of the money that's flowing into the IOC, and there is no interruption of entertainment of people. And this kind of performative piece also brings with it a sense of false satisfaction, in the sense that a lot of people, a lot of countries might feel that for the duration of the Olympics is somewhere that they need to behave, that they need to make sure that they are following international law, that they are being good international neighbors, right? But it's a very performative thing in the sense that it ends as soon as the Olympics end. And that becomes quite problematic when you see how the long term effects of that pans out. And I think that is something that is important to take into consideration.
I completely agree. It was a very nice explanation and a very holistic take on what peace means in the Olympics. Yeah, Anu, go ahead.
Yeah, correctly agree with this thing that game is something that brings people together, and Olympic is such a platform that brings all the athletes together around the world, regardless of political differences between their country. For example, we have even witnessed the joint march of North and South Korea athletes under a unified flag. So somehow it symbolizes and it bridges the gap between the countries as well. So whole like as a perspective, overall perspective, Olympic idea is something excellence, friendship, respect, and mutual understanding between peoples of different nationalities. So it's overall it's somehow a platform that promoting peace, unity, and global cooperation.
So I think we've come to a very interesting consensus that would we want peace for only a few months and that also only on a certain stage, or do we want prolonged peace more deeply? So I think that's something we can all ponder over. That's I think we got a really nice answer to that question. Moving on, in what ways have the Olympics reflected societal norms and values of different time periods? Would anyone like to take a go at it? Yeah, Dhiman, please go ahead.
So the first of all, we start. I should start where it began. In 1896, the idea behind
Dhiman, I don't think I can hear you.
yeah, am I audible now?
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah, now you're audible. Yeah.
Yes. So in 1896, the sole idea behind starting of the Olympics was that for the nation states to come together and join in a friendly competition of sports. But the idea is that every nation then started to exert himself. So first of all, in the first we had of the political influence on the sport was in the year 1936 in the Berlin Olympics. The idea behind conducting the Berlin Olympics in the mind of the Nazi government was two things. First of all, we would show the might of Germany, a nation reborn, and secondly, we show the superiority German slash Aryan race, the so-called superior race. Now, what happened is that the idea of the Olympics began to show your national pride, to show that as a nation you're superior. And then you had the Cold War era from 1950s to 1990s. Whenever the United States and the USSR used to meet in any competition, for example, in the 1985 in the Miracle on the Ice, in the ice hockey tournament, there used to be a lot of tension behind the sports because it's because Olympics simply became from who can run the fastest to which country system is better. If a the athlete from communist USSR is winning, that basically means that the system of the Soviet Union system is better than the American system. Or if the American is winning, that the American system is better than the Soviet system. So sports started intermixing with politics. And then now we have the current times where China uses this policy where they think that the sports within their country as a whole. For example, in 2008, there was a certain controversy where the Chinese national anthem was sung by a different girl, yet the girl was mouthing the piece of someone different because Olympics have now become a sort of image competition. You must have seen scenes where the Chinese athletes are crying because they won a silver, an Olympic silver, while British athletes are celebrating because they even won a bronze. So you have to imagine that now Olympic sports have stopped become simply contests of sports. They've started becoming contests of ideologies. They have started becoming contests of national pride. And I think this has worked into the wider Olympic network as a whole. For example, the current Olympics are being held in Paris. But you will see that there's no Russian team there. There would be no athlete from a country called Russia. Now you will see that even politics has come into the sphere of sports. In any reasonable country, in any reasonable world, Russia should have been allowed to come to the sports because Olympics is different from having war. But the fact is that it's allowing you to make an impact. It's allowing you to make a wider impact by simply saying that we are keeping Russia out because it has violated international law by invading a sovereign country. So now Olympics have become a sort of political statement of what we are, who we are. For example, during the Rio de Janeiro Olympics, the sole idea was that Brazil is no longer a third world nation. We are a first world nation. We are a developed nation. And in other countries, in 2012 London Olympics was basically that Britain is still viable. We are strong, independent, and first world country. We are an economic power also, and we should be taken seriously. So now I think the idea behind India asking for Olympics is basically that the Olympics will serve as sort of a graduation ceremony for India. That no longer third world poor country. No, we are a rich, powerful, and a well organized country, and we can have an Olympics. So that's behind the idea, like the same idea the Chinese had in the 2008 Olympics, that this country will show that India will show that China is different than what the image is, and we can improve ourselves. And that has worked for them. So I believe the idea behind India organizing the Olympics is to change the image. If you change the perspective of how the world will look at you, will change the way the world will do business with you. The world will have an alliance with you. So I think this is the reason why India is investing into Olympics.
Yeah, I think you very nicely brought out the changing political norms that are reflected in the Olympics. Yeah, Anu, please go ahead.
Because Demant has already talked about the political norms, but just a little bit, like we can talk about the societal norms and values that can, come
Mhm.
across throughout the Olympic Games. And when we are talking about the ancient, like history, ancient Olympic Games, it's all like credit goes to Greek because
Mm.
it's all their religions and mythologies and their events, that rituals honoring the gods, and that how it started. So somehow there was societal norms like a excluding women, slaves, and non-Greeks, and that was like much more evident than when they were not participating in it. And even in the modern Olympics, like after 1896 to 1920s, we can see that there was very little participations from the women. So somehow it even showcase you the um, like society and norms. But again, we can see lot more participations from the women now, and like there are especially some games dedicated to that when where women are participating more. So like Olympic is something which is reflecting societal norms, values, and political norms as well.
Yeah, Tarana, go ahead.
Yeah, I would also like to mention that I also believe that the values that are showcased in the Olympics also are dependent on which country or party is like stronger in international relations affairs at the moment. For example, Dhiman mentioned the Berlin Olympics during Nazi Germany, right? Now, one of the major controversies was Jesse Owens winning four medals, and Hitler leaving the stadium. But another controversy that many people miss out on is the U.S. coaches. Are the U.S. coaches benching two American Jewish at the time?
Mm.
I feel like America is simply reflecting on Nazi Germany's ideas and values to remain in their favor in the Olympics.
I completely agree. And if I take the liberty of maybe expanding societal norms to also mean cultural norms, I remember an incident when I was watching the 2016 Olympics and India won a silver in badminton. So obviously in the final, PV Sindhu, she lost the match. But I remember watching her very silently going at the end of the game, picking up the racket of her opponent, Carolina Marin. She touched it to her forehead as a sign of respect, and she just went and kept the racket on her opponent's stand. And I feel that reflected such an important cultural norm of India, the respect we hold for the instruments we play with, the respect we hold for the ground we play on. And I think that simple gesture was talked about for months on end, and I still remember that. So I feel the Olympics, if they because so many eyes are watching them, they depict these cultural norms also so beautifully, and they're the perfect stage. And I think that's one of the reasons maybe why India is also bidding to host the Olympics in 2036. So thank you, panelists. Those examples really helped us understand the question. Moving on, how have athletes used Olympic platforms to make political statements, and what impact have these actions had? Yeah, Tarana, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I believe throughout history, political issues have had some major effects on the Olympics, changing the trajectory of its workings. Right. One of the major examples being the 1972 Munich Olympics, marked by the tragic terrorist attack on the Israeli team, which led to heightened awareness and changes in Olympics take on security protocols, putting more emphasis on athlete safety. But if we are looking into more specific examples where actions of an athlete have changed the Olympics and political issues currently existing in the world. I believe one of the earliest examples would be in the 1968 Mexico City Olympics, where American sprinter Tommy Smith and John Carlos raised their fists in a Black Power salute during the medal ceremony for the 200-meter race. I feel like this powerful gesture highlighted the racial injustice and the civil rights movement at the time in the United States. And although both athletes at the time had received severe backlash, including suspension from the US team and threats, their action brought out that global attention to the racial inequality that it wasn't receiving at the time. I feel like another more recent example would be the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, which was held during the COVID-19 pandemic. There was this American shot putter, Raven Saunders, I believe. She crossed her arms in an X on the podium, symbolizing the intersection of, I'm going to quote this actually. It was the intersection of where all people who are oppressed meet. I feel like her gesture really highlighted issues related to uh, LGBTQ rights, mental health, and even racial inequalities, which are existing in the present day as well. And the International Olympic Committee initially investigated but did not put any sanction on Saunders, reflecting the evolving attitude towards the activism brought by athletes. As you can see, the clear contrast between the actions taken in 1968 and the actions taken in 2020. Another example that I would also bring to the table, though not done by a specific athlete, but rather a huge amount of athletes, was the 1980 Soviet, the 1980 boycott of the Moscow Olympics, which was in response to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. This boycott brought a lot of geopolitical tension of the Cold War and had a substantial effect, leading to the absence of many top athletes and influencing subsequent Olympic boycotts, such as the Soviet-led boycott of 1984 Los Angeles Olympics. I feel like all these examples demonstrate the range of political statements made at the Olympics, from personal gestures to national actions, and each drawing attention to critical issues that are faced not only in the past but in present day as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you've made some very good points. Dimant, would you like to substantiate on some of them?
I would like to adding on to every fact as has been that Olympics are an open stage to present your ideas because of simple fact that the world is watching. And I feel that Olympics have been, for example, the refugee team you had, for example, in the 20, if you remember, in the Olympics held in Rio de Janeiro, there was a refugee team from refugees from Syria, from Iran were allowed to play. For example, you had the case of the Iranian athletes, many of whom, for example, there was a certain Iranian athlete who refused to play against an Israeli opponent, whose government told her to not to play against the Israeli opponent, but she had to play because it's a spirit of the sports. And that basically shows that how politics has been working along with sports, because the Iranian government doesn't recognize Israel as a country. They think there's no Israel, there's only a Palestine, there's nothing there. So I feel that Olympics are a very open ground. It's the world is watching you, and you can make any movement to change, send your voices through. For example, it's if I'm allowed to use an euphemism, it's basically like having an entire concert for yourself, and you have the mic, and the whole world will hear it, even the deaf will hear it, because if you it's just a bigger stage. So I believe that politics have worked into the grounds of the Olympics, and they will continue to work, because who can miss the opportunity of doing it in the Olympics? Because an Olympics has a lot of media personnel. It's widely open and everybody can see it. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the reason why the Olympics, or why why so many political statements can be generalized through the Olympics, is because sports persons are naturally very lovable figures. So they have a lot of power in their position. And I feel with obviously great power comes great responsibility. And I think that's something that sports people, as well as the audience viewing them, must keep in mind. For our fourth question, I'd like to ask, can you provide examples where participation in the Olympics led to improved international relations? What long term impacts do the Olympics have on the host nation's international standing and relations? Yeah, Dhimand.
So I would like to answer your question by simple fact that many of the countries use Olympics, either hosting Olympic or participating in an Olympic, to depict themselves as I mentioned, as a new country, a new image of a country. So, for example, the most exciting thing I can have is that when Seoul Olympics was about to happen in 1984. So, what happened that you were having Olympics in Seoul? The DPRK government, the North Korean government, which has written in its constitution that it will not stop until the annihilation of the South, opened its border and basically said, we can hold the Olympics together, one in Pyongyang, one in Seoul. Call it a political move or call it a simple, as I can say, a genuine humanitarian move. This shows that Olympics have the ability to change and countries' international relation. For example, you had situations where the countries wanted to, for example, you have not, it's governed the relation of North Korea and it has governed the relations of Iran. So because the Olympics as a very secret event, because there's no many of the people don't regard Olympics as a massive bicep curling competition of nation states. They regard it as with the spirit of the sports. I like to see athletes running from different continents towards a simple goal that to get the gold medal and be the best of the athletes there is. And the issue is that no nation state wants to spoil its reputation by doing something that would harm itself in the longer run. So, for example, in the 1970 Munich Olympic, as my good friend mentioned here, that there was a terrorist attack by the Black September movement with the Israeli athletes that led to a huge outburst of sympathy towards Israel. And you would not believe it that they were using the same thing till 1982 to justify an invasion of Lebanon. While the same fact that they believe that the same organization which did this, the PLO, still exists in Lebanon. So you can see how a simple attack in Olympics led to such a large invasion of Lebanon. Because the incident itself, it's happening in the Olympics. And in popular imagination, Olympics is a free and open ground where everybody can run. Everybody has to prove himself by fair means. General George Patton said that war is a perfect human competition. I would like to disagree here. I would think Olympics are the perfect competition because they measure your nation's ability to train new athletes. And as you can see that even a small attack or even a small skirmish between athletes can lead to massive repercussions between different countries. For example, in 1958, you had a brawl between Hungarian and Soviet Union athletes because of the 1956 crushing of the Budapest uprising by the Soviet army. So you can see how all of this works into the wider context of Olympics. So this is my opinion about how.
Yeah, I think you've made some very, very interesting points. And I'd like to tie what you've said with our last question because I think both of them are very synonymous. What are some notable examples of Olympic boycotts and what were the political motivations behind them? Yeah, Tarana.
I actually wanted to add to the previous question.
Yeah, go ahead.
The bombing relations. So last semester I had taken this course on Chinese foreign policy, and the earliest depictions of China's foreign policy are extremely cold towards every country possible. And at the time, uh, America and China had taken part in this diplomacy called ping pong diplomacy right before the Munich Olympics, where they had invited American ping pong players or table tennis players to China, and those were the one of the first American people to actually visit China, including journalists as well. And I feel like those were the first signs of warming relations between China and America, which eventually led to China even occupying a seat in the Permanent Security Council. I feel like that is one of the major examples of how Olympics brings other countries together, not only through diplomacy but through sports as well.
That's correct. And Dhimant, yeah, would you like to add on?
Yeah, but I think thank you, Tarana, for reminding me. I almost forgot about the cricket diplomacy we had. Now, I know cricket is not part of the Olympics, but India and Pakistan, two nation states, for example, one of them is so ideologically that India is its enemy. Now you have people you're using cricket to diplomatically talk to each other to iron out differences. This shows that sports is also a method of diplomacy. For example, cricket diplomacy in with India, Pakistan, it was started by General Ziaul Haq. We can complain about his intentions regarding what his project was regarding the whole cricket diplomacy, but the fact is that there was a step. There was a step that perhaps India and Pakistan, instead of destroying each other, could coexist in Asia. And I believe that cricket played a major part in that.
No, and I agree. And I think because India is advocating for the inclusion of cricket in the Olympics, we'll probably see this politics, we'll probably see it merge with the Olympic politics very, very soon if all goes according to India's plan. Yeah, Charu, you also raised your hand.
Yeah, so that's regarding the fifth question.
Yeah.
If you can repeat the fifth question again, I'm so sorry.
Sure, yeah, I think I should. What are some notable examples of Olympic boycotts and what were the political motivations behind them?
Yeah,
Yeah, Charlie,
so
first. Yeah.
yeah, so I think boycotts are kind of at this point an instrumental part of Olympics, if we should, because they've been noted in every single edition. Going as far as the most recent Winter Olympics, Beijing Olympics of 2022, we saw a lot of countries boycott the Beijing Olympics because of the mistreatment of the Uyghur Muslims that happened. And this also, I think, points out to like almost like from the beginning of Olympics, boycotts are very prominent thing, and especially they're more noteworthy in war periods. I think. So if I remember, I think during the Cold War, which was at the Olympics that followed the Cold War in 1956. I think several countries like Egypt and their allies and all that, they boycotted the Olympics because of the Cold War, and China again did not participate in these Olympics. And in 1920, this is another interesting thing to note is it's not always countries boycotting Olympics, but also the Olympics Federation disqualifying countries or not inviting them because of political reasons, right? And in 1920, we witnessed that the countries that lost World War II, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Turkey, were not invited to the 1920 Olympics. And the South Africa was banned for I think since 1964 to quite a significant period because of its apartheid. And in context of the current upcoming Olympics, one interesting thing to note is the Olympics Federation seems to have taken a shift in the way they view politics within the Olympics itself, as they refuse to let political considerations get in the way of them not inviting Russia because of the Russia-Ukraine war. And they chose the neutral way and said, oh, this is not something that we need to interfere in, and that's something that is left up to the countries itself. And we can debate about whether that's a good or a bad outlook to have. But that shift is definitely noteworthy, and it's also, I think, the kind of back and forth that we see a lot of the times with boycotting of the Olympics, like when the United States coordinated like a really the most significant boycott, I believe, until date in 1980, where the Soviet Union, I think it was held in the Soviet Union, but regardless, they boycotted several countries along with the United States boycotted the 1980 Olympics, and following that in 1984, the Soviet Union and its allies boycotted the Olympics that was held in the United States. So this back and forth, I think, is a very fun view on how international relations itself is interpreted, and a good feel to kind of see it play out in other aspects of life as well.
Thank you for that answer. And yeah, Dhiman, go ahead.
So boycotting an Olympic is basically what I would consider to be an international method of showing any other country the finger. And what I believe, for example, in 1980, it was after a year after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and the anti-Mujahideen operation which had begun in Afghanistan. So the issue of boycotting was to show that we are supporting the people of uh, Afghanistan against the struggle. Of course, Soviet Union would get angry because how can you not have major countries in the Olympics? It's sort of like why you are having an Olympics in the first place? Then you had in 1984 the Soviet Union did showed the finger back to the Americans by not coming into their Olympics. So boycotting an Olympics is basically saying that you know what, you guys are evil and you are just spoiling the image of Olympics, and that's why we are not participating in this Olympics. And for in the era of past in Olympics during the Greek times, the Hellenic times, boycotting an Olympic used to question the very legitimacy of the person who's organizing the Olympics, the gods. And that used to be a corpus belli for war. You can go to war for somebody who's not given an Olympics. But the fact is that right now it's not that Olympics have changed in nature. It's not no longer religious festival in favor of Zeus or Hera. It's simply just a sporting event for everybody to come together and join. So I believe that Olympics do have a boycotting an Olympic basically is is undeclared nuclear option. That basically, you can press this button. We are boycotting your Olympics because we don't like your face and we don't like you. Sorry, my apologies for my casualty, but it's simply saying that we don't like your face and we don't want to see you here. So we are boycotting your Olympic and similar respect for that. So we can see that Olympics is boycotting Olympic is simply just that. It's throwing up a temper tantrum basically, but it shows that country is serious about its interests. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think no one can really disagree with that. And boycott is such a deeply political move, and to see it feature in a sporting event, I think it kind of leads us to the consensus that humans are incapable of leaving politics out of anything. So wherever humans are, politics will follow. So I think that's all the questions we had, and I think after this discussion, it'll probably allow us as panelists and also our viewers to view the Olympics when they do happen from a more holistic standpoint, because now we realize that there's a lot more to the Olympics than what they show us on TV. There's a lot of backwater talks that happen, there's a lot of politics that happen, and I think it's honestly just made the games a lot more interesting for us as viewers. I would like to thank all my panelists today for taking the time out and joining us in this discussion. Thank you. Thank you, guys.